Welcome, everybody, to no longer the next day takeaways, now the severe takeaways. I'm E. Spencer Kyte, friendly neighborhood Spencer man. He is Harry Powell in London town. We are here on a Tuesday talking about UFC Vegas 63. And the reason we wanted to sort of shuffle things around and move things around a little bit, first and foremost, Harry and I get a couple extra days here to kind of sit, let our thoughts build, let our ideas come together, figure everything out, see what people are talking about coming out of this event after a day or two. We also clear some space for the bosses and the big show. Shawnee and Graham do a great job every Sunday on the Patreon and here on the YouTube channel, discussing everything that has happened sort of over the weekend and in that immediate space with the big show, as I said. And so we just sort of pushed back a couple days, and I'm going to be honest, I kind of like it. I really enjoyed speaking with you every Sunday, but it was nice to not do anything on Sunday this week for the first time in God knows however long. It was my birthday, so I did very, very little. I watched some football. I watched some shows that your missus has told me is going to be disappointing. I hung out with my dog, who we are acclimating still. And I slowly started to put together my thoughts on Saturday's effort. Good, sir, before we get into it, how are you?
Well, a very happy birthday to you, sir.
You're too kind.
I'm grand now. I am here in England, in London. I agree with your statements about the Sundays. It's very strange. MMA is a sport that is all consuming, even as a media member, and it feels as though there is very little time that we get to do other things. And I know that sounds maybe exaggerated or blasé or whatever, but it's kind of not. And what I mean by time to do other things is even just mental time, right? Time spent thinking about things, stuff, whatever. For here in SevereMMA, I will, me personally, I can only speak of my own experience, but I write my spotlight on a Sunday night, Monday morning. I put that out. I'm then thinking about the card coming up on the weekend so I can make sure I'm ready for the preview show. Then there will be a Speaker's Corner taping that week. That's MMA thought. We then get to Friday and then maybe a rehash of the preview show in the chats, or people will ask me questions or whatever. Saturday is the fights. Sunday was the takeaways. And then we're back round to the spotlight, and the merry-go-round continues. So it was very welcome to have a Sunday of doing nothing. I actually watched the fights today, which was wonderful, because I got a chance to do a whole Sunday thing, with a real Sunday thing, without having to do anything MMA related. So that was wonderful. So yes, anyway, we shall continue.
Yeah, just to put a finer edge on what Harry said about it's nice to have. None of us are complaining about the jobs that we have and the opportunities that are before us. But yesterday was the first day since I've been healthy from COVID, so little over a month, where I didn't put out any content, where I didn't do any form of MMA writing, contemplation. The most I did was kind of flip through Twitter and see what some of the reactions are and what some of the talking points are, because obviously we're here to talk about some of those takeaways, and we'll get right into it. Main event, Arnold Allen, Calvin Kattar, ends 8 seconds into the second round. An unfortunate knee injury for Calvin Kattar. One of those instances where he gets hurt late in the first round, throwing a uncharacteristic flying knee attempt. Lands awkwardly. You see the knee sort of give way. Comes back out to start the second. after, giving his corner the like, yeah, I don't know what happened. Let's just go. After the doctor gives him the cursory, like, hey, are you okay? Yeah, doc, I'm fine. Tries to check a kick. And if you see the reverse angle of it, so watching the fights live or watching the broadcast, you saw from behind Arnold Allen. So looking at Calvin Kattar, he checks a lead leg kick and then collapses to the floor, grabbing at his injured knee. If you see the reverse angle of that, seeing the back of Calvin Kattar, when Arnold Allen lands that kick and Calvin Kattar braces himself on the ground to absorb that kick, you see in the back of his knee that sort of action. We have to start with Arnold Allen because I don't want to put the guy that was victorious on the back burner. He looked very good to me in the opening round. I thought he was on his way to having the performance that he needed to have, the kind of dominant effort against a truly established guy that he needed to have to further convince the masses that thus far weren't convinced or sold on him. And then this happened. What were your thoughts on the 5 minutes and 8 seconds that we got and what the remainder of that fight might have looked like had it continued?
So I'm going to slightly push back.
This is what we're here for.
I don't think we can say he was on the way or looked like he was on the way to the dominant performance that he needed. This is still and was still Calvin Kattar. I mean, I think, and we'll talk about this afterwards, but I think there is a discussion to be had about the knee and about going back to the corner and just even letting him out for that second round. And
we'll have that conversation.
There's definitely a conversation to be had there. And I think there's a similar conversation to be had about Dolidze and Phil Hawes. But obviously that had a slightly different conclusion. I think Arnold looked really good. He looked really good. In the pre-show, one of the things that we spoke about was Arnold being able to move his feet and Arnold being able to create a circular motion for Kattar to follow. And if Kattar were to choose to cut the cage off, Arnold was going to have to punish him with something. He did that pretty well, he did that pretty well. I thought Kattar made some really interesting adjustments during the fight. And I think Arnold made some really interesting adjustments to the adjustments that Kattar made. The thing that impressed me was that there seemed to be some additions to Arnold's game. He seemed to not be throwing everything with haymakers. He seemed to come in and was a bit more cerebral about the shots that he was going to throw and then eventually throw. I was really impressed with when he hurt Kattar the first time, not from the knee, but when he hurt him with a left hand. When he swarmed on him, he didn't just go massive big hooks to the dome. He went to the body. He offered different looks. He went uppercuts. He went straights. And then when he realized Kattar wasn't going anywhere, he backed immediately off because he was like, I don't need to waste energy here 3 minutes into round one. This motherfucker is probably going to be here for the rest of these 20 minutes. Let me just go back to what was working and let me just pick my shots and do the things. I thought the left hand, Dom Cruz sort of said it beautifully. He said that the left hand was like a lightning rod. And the thing that Arnold Allen was doing really well is timing Kattar's footsteps, timing his movement and landing it perfectly. And there were two shots near the end of the round that really snapped Calvin Kattar's head back from those left hands. And those, I think, were the most significant shots of the round. And I felt like Arnold had grown some confidence from that. There was a moment that at the end of the first round, he sort of nodded to himself like, all right, motherfuckers, I guess I'm supposed to be here. And I guess that I could do the fighting against the good guys. I thought that the election to go for an Anaconda was a silly one, personally. Why try and choke a dude if you can't stand up?
Just smash him. It's our usual. Anybody that has watched the takeaways for the duration of this show understands. Just smash. We love submissions. Harry is a grappler. We love them. But in that position, it was odd to me as well. Just beat the hell out of him. The referee is in some ways looking to have a way to save him. Beat the hell out of him.
Yeah, like I think the other side is that you have to, I mean, look, in the moment, things happen, right? You just make choices, whatever it is. But there was certainly not going to be, you know, the way that Calvin Kattar dropped, what's he going to do? How's he going to build frames? Well, he's not going to look for butterfly hooks because his knee doesn't work. He was on his right hip, meaning that the frame was going to be his left hip. How's he going to shift to the other side if he can't plant his foot on the floor properly? Like, and okay, like I said, in the moment, these aren't questions that you're asking. You're not going to stand above him and be like, oh yeah, that leg's fucked. Right, got you. I'm going to do the things then. But I do think that there is that's something that Arnold could learn from. And instead of shooting for the neck, just smash him. And you know, like you already stated, I love a submission, and we could talk about the opening fight of the night where we get a really nice submission. But in those situations, at the end of the day, and maybe this is a conversation for Speaker's Corner, but to finish the highest of high-level fights, searching for subs, especially in round one, when people, okay, you can argue that they're not slippy and whatever, but when they are fully cerebrally there, it's going to be tough to finish subs, especially anacondas, with like 12 seconds left or whatever it was.
Right. So the second part of this, sticking to the Arnold Allen of it all that I want to discuss. It's now 10-0 in the UFC. It's a 12-fight winning streak overall. We all roared in London, or after the London show. You were the only one of us in actual London when he said, yeah, all right, I guess Calvin Kattar. We all groaned because it should have been Alexander Volkanovski then. I was part of the chat on Saturday when Arnold Allen comes out and kind of hims and haws and, yeah, maybe throw me an interim, maybe, you know, whatever. Everyone else in the chat erupted. Oh my God, he's killing himself. He's got to have. I'm of two minds with it. I fully understand what Sean and Graham talk about on the big show, what we all sort of discussed in the chat. It's, you know, the question is coming, especially if you're Arnold Allen in the position you're in. Main event, 10 straight wins, not that many people ahead of you. And so you've got to be prepared for it. And at this point, the only name that really makes sense is Volkanovski. You just should put it out there. But the other side of it to me is, and you saw it on his face, like to me, you saw it in his body language. He doesn't want to win the fight that way. That doesn't feel like an opportunity where he can come out and say, yeah, that just proved I'm ready for a title shot. Let's go, Volk. Also, that's not who Arnold Allen is. And we, I think, better than most, probably know that. He is a somewhat awkward, goofy dude who in the next couple weeks will post a vlog of him out at some fair eating some terrible meals that we will absolutely adore because we love it. And he's just going to kind of go about his business. Additionally, he thought maybe he hurt his hand again, which would be absolutely crushing. And so to want him to go out there and just all of a sudden turn into a guy that's got like, and he just doesn't seem in general at like a very willing and desirous public speaker. And so to suddenly want him to go out there and turn into a great orator that lays out why he is the absolute clear-cut next in line to challenge for the title felt a little bit like you're asking too much of this dude in this situation that, fine, if he went out and smashed him, I understand. And everything's fine. His hands feel fine. Calvin Kattar wasn't hurt. Fine. then I'm fully on board. Dude, you got to go out there and grab the mic from Michael Bisping. But in that situation, I understood it. What were your thoughts on his process through the end of that fight and that interview?
So I didn't watch it. I don't watch them. But what I will say is I disagree with both of you. I think, look.
Are you just being contrarian today?
Oh, no.
Or is it just...
What I think is that there are two sides of this. And we talked about this on the pre-show. On the pre-show, we mentioned that with Arnold Allen, one of the things that strikes us is that he's still somebody that's asking questions of himself. And somebody that asks questions of themselves as publicly and as plainly as Arnold Allen does, that's a man that doesn't necessarily see this as prize fighting as a primary. If you're a prize fighting guy, Sean O'Malley, Conor McGregor, etc., you're going to go in there and you're going to say, doesn't matter how you spin it, but you're going to go in there and you're going to say, look, motherfuckers, there's 12 fights on a bounce. No other cunt's done this in the division. That belt might as well be mine now. Volkanovski's fucked off to 155. Give me the gold, right? Fine. However you spin that. Could Arnold Allen have gone and just spoken his actual mind, which was, look, I didn't want to win that fight that way. You know, as soon as I celebrated, I immediately went and consoled Calvin Kattar because no fighter wants to win in that way. I put in a very hard camp for this. I knew the guy that I was up against, and for him to go out in the way that he did, especially when I was looking as good as I was in the first round, is not how I want to do this. However, that does make it 12 straight, and there's nobody above me that makes any sense. If they want to do an interim, let's do an interim, but my name should be on that side, right? I think the thing that we have to do here is look at every individual case, and you mentioned it. Arnold Allen is not the guy that's going to go out and blow the microphone up and do the talking and shout down the thing and whatever. He wants to go in and he wants to just fight. And I think that was completely understood when after he goes in and smashes the 7 bells out of Dan Hooker, he's like, oh, well, there's a dude just one rank above me and I should fight that guy. And I think the other side of it, and maybe this is in Allen's head, I don't know. Obviously, I can't speak to his experience, but optically, when the UFC try and sell this, what they really want to do is they want to show Arnold Allen beating the piss out of Calvin Kattar, right? They don't have highlight reels for that now. The only guy that they can show him destroying is Dan Hooker, because that's the guy that everyone knows. Can they show the ninja choke on Mads Burnell? Yeah, sure, but who actually knows Mads Burnell in the wider community? Not many that watch MMA from a sort of a casual perspective. So I understand why he's not screaming down the microphone, because again, if people had just tuned in on a Saturday night to watch Calvin Kattar beat up some English kid, and Calvin Kattar just so happens to blow his knee out, and that kid jumps on the microphone and is like, give me my fucking title shot, or even the Arnold Allen version of that, which is like, maybe, possibly, I did
I've done a thing here. Could I maybe just fight for the belt?
Right. They're going to be like, who the fuck's that guy? Like, he doesn't deserve this shit. So I think I understand completely what Sean and Graham are saying, but you need to blow up the microphone. You need to get what's yours. And I understand what you're saying. But I just think we also have to look at it from he is who he is. He's going to be who he's going to be,
It often feels, and I said this in the chat, in our chat, it's sort of an untenable situation, because if he does go out there and do the out of character, give me my goddamn title shot, he gets pilloried. He gets crushed. You're going to come out here and do that after it happened that way? What did you do in that fight that shows us? Right? Like if Yair Rodriguez jumped on the mic after the Brian Ortega fight and said the same thing, we'd have been like, bro, that was a 50-50 fight until his shoulder popped out. What are we doing?
I think the only saving grace would have been if Arnold Allen blasts Kattar with a kick, Kattar then goes to stand on the leg and his knee blows out.
Correct.
You could make an argument that the kick damage, but that wasn't
Correct.
the case.
Yeah, if it was a situation like, as we'll get to later in the fight, later in our conversation, where Roman Dolidze shreds Phil Hawes' knee, and then Phil Hawes is unable to stand, and it leads to whatever. Sure, it was a freak accident. Calvin threw something that he doesn't normally throw. He landed very awkwardly, and it just went. And so I understand it. I understand, as you said, I understand all sides of it. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. I wrote on Friday for OSDB Sports that I thought the winner of this should fight Yair Rodriguez for an interim title, or at the very worst, essentially the interim title, number one contender, whatever you want to call it. If you want to put gold on the line, fine, great, whatever. That should be next. Josh Emmett can get upset all he wants. That's fine. Come yell at me, Josh. You can fight Max Holloway if Max wants to fight. Because go out and beat that guy, right? We've made so many other people go through the Max Holloway gauntlet. You can try that gauntlet. Not the guy that's won 10 straight fights undefeated in the UFC and Arnold Allen. And, unfortunately, Josh, you're not as popular and marketable as Yair Rodriguez. So that was my booking. I think that's probably the way we're going to see these things line up, whether it is an interim title, whether it's just a 5-round main event for the number one contendership. We'll find that out later. The other part we obviously have to get to here is the injury and continuing and sort of that process. And it feels like this is a thing we talk about every week. We're having an instance every week where we can have this conversation, or where we can go over this sort of talking point. I want to say right now, I am going to reach out to Tyson Chartier. I haven't yet. Because look, even I, as a guy that wants answers, have some goddamn class. And I'm going to let the man get back home, see his family, get his guy sorted before I reach out and do the hey, can you walk me through this? But I will be having hey, can you walk me through this? I don't know if we'll do it on video, but one way or another, Tyson and I, he was here last week for a conversation with, we'll have the conversation, because it's a thing we said last week that I'm super curious about, that I'd love to have an extended conversation with a number of coaches. And maybe that's what I'm going to end up doing in terms of putting it together. But Calvin clearly hurts himself, goes back to the corner. It's sort of, it's not even really, hey, I don't know what's wrong with my knee, and straight into instructions. And then the doctor comes, they check it, they don't start the fight right away. The doctor comes in, the doctor says, hey, are you okay? He says, yeah, away we go. And 8 seconds later, I said at the time, what are we doing? On Twitter, this was one of the first fights in a while that I've not been doing a ton of work as I'm going, and said, what are we doing? His knee's gone. He's not winning this fight without a knee. It's the TJ Dillashaw fight all over again. He's not winning this fight without his left hand or without his left arm. What are we doing? I'm at a loss.
So I'm going to try and look at this from a slightly different perspective and posit a slightly different opinion. My actual personal opinion, I'll get to afterwards. I think in MMA, one of the major downfalls, maybe this is a speaker's corner as well, is coaches and teammates in some fashion have far too close of an emotional relationship. If you are a football manager or an NFL manager or a hockey team manager or head coach, whatever that title is in that thing, if you see a player or a sports person, whatever, do an action and they collapse, due to what's clearly a knee injury or whatever injury it is, right? Let's say it's basketball. Your man throws the ball, his fucking shoulder falls out. As a coach, you're not going to call a timeout, massage your shoulder back in, slap him on the back of the head and be like, go on, Kyrie Irving, or whoever the basketball person is. You go shoot some hoops, bud. Like, it's just not. And that's not to say that those coaches don't have emotional relationships with their athletes.
Correct.
But in MMA, it's very different. Tyson Chaudier talked on a conversation with about one of the poignant points that he made is, in his opinion, it's important for coaches to have competed at some level, right? Like not necessarily fucking UFC title level or whatever it is, but at some level, so that when their athletes are in the trenches in that training room, and they're going through a hard session and they turn to their coaches, the solace and the mercy that is offered by that coach can be ratified and trusted because the coach has seen and understood some of the sacrifices needed in order to get through those training sessions, those training camps, and then the eventual contests. Where I think that falls down, though, is that there then isn't a body or a brain or a mind in that corner that is thinking rationally and unemotionally. What you're thinking as a coach, as an emotional person in a corner, is how do I get my guy ready in a minute of time, less than, because I've got to get in the fucking cage, less than to get him ready to win this fight. The conversation that was had was immediately Tyson said, is it your right knee? And Kattar says, yeah, I don't know. And Tyson's like, what happened? How does it feel? And Kattar's just like, I don't know. The then comment is, well, let's forget about the knee. And to me, that's where it ends. Right. Again, and I'll finish this before we can do my personal opinion afterwards. But if in the Henry Cejudo, Demetrius Johnson 1 fight, Henry rolls his ankle, and by the end of it, it looks bad for a hot second, and then by the end of the round, Henry was moving fine again, right? Legitimately fine, moving fine. Not once did he collapse, cover up, fetal position, did it look like the fight was over? This was an injury that, yes, a freak injury, whatever, but it looked as though immediately he was going to be able to recover. If your fighter collapses to the canvas, there has to be a more serious conversation had in that corner.
The other part of it too, to what you're saying about the closeness of the relationship and the investment that's there. And I don't mean financial. I mean just friends, closeness. These men and women are deeply, deeply connected. And we saw it a couple of years ago when Anthony Smith came out after his fight with Glover Teixeira and said, look, I will fire a motherfucker if they throw in the towel and try to prevent me from continuing to go out there. And I thought that was stupid at the time. I still think it's stupid now. Because the thing that has been the moments that stand out the most for me in corners are Duke Roufus telling Anthony Pettis, look, son, you don't need to go back out there. If you don't have your weapons, we're not doing this. When he's got a broken hand against, I think, Tony Ferguson. It's Trevor Whitman, I believe, with somebody, I can't remember who it was, that was just like, nope, Nate Marquardt, maybe, who he has a very deep, like if you want to talk about deep, long-standing relationships, we're done, bud. Nope, we're not. I can't let you go out there. I get that it is insanely difficult. I get that you know how much that person wants to go out there and compete. And to me, this is where take them out of it. Take the fighter out of it, but also find a way, commissions, ringside physicians, referees, to take the combatants and their associates out of it. It has to be out of their hands. There has to be some kind of situation. And I don't genuinely, I don't care how many people are going to say, yeah, but if that athlete thinks he can continue, great. TJ Dillashaw thought he could continue. If something's jammed up and something's as bad as we know this is going to be, like this is an ACL, maybe more.
Yeah, definitely more.
Like there's got to be a way that one of these doctors comes in and goes, yeah, no, that looked like your ACL blew. We're not doing this. I don't care that you can stand and walk and whatever. You can't beat that guy across there. That's fine for all intents and purposes without that leg. So we're done here.
So I
don't know what the solution is.
Yeah, I don't know either. And I think it's far more difficult than we...
For sure.
I mean, all of these things are far more difficult.
100%.
But like, I don't think necessarily the right answer is to put it in the hands of the officials. Because the problem you have, the ringside physician, I think, should be taking more flack for this than anyone else.
Agreed.
Because your man's gone in there and either he wasn't fucking watching Calvin Kattar collapse to the floor, or he hasn't been shown a replay, because he goes in and he doesn't even touch the knee. He doesn't ask Calvin
make him walk
to perform any movements on the knee to prove that the knee is stable enough to continue in a fist fight, where there could well be very dynamic, very explosive movements needed from that leg. Now, we know, and we should know, that if the knee is blown, then actually walking in a straight line is fine, because your body is supposed to do that. You don't need a lot of knee stability to walk in a straight line. But now ask him to walk and then immediately turn right and see what happens. Right? And if he can do it, all right, maybe there's a conversation to be had. But at this point, it is a meme in the MMA community that the ringside physician will never intervene. And what was said, what did Dom Cruz say on the commentary? Do you remember?
I don't.
So the ringside physician comes in and Bisping announces, or Fitzgerald or whoever it is, announces that Herb Dean has stopped the fight and called a timeout so that the doctor can come in. And Dom just says, don't worry about it. He's going to lie through his fucking teeth and continue.
Right. He's going to lie to him to continue, which is exactly what happens.
So the point that we're making of taking it out of the fighter's hands, I don't think that we should be necessarily taking it out of the corner's hands. I just think the corner should be doing a better job.
Yes.
But the thing that we have to be doing here is, if it gets to the ringside physician, and this is all about like hierarchical decision making, at the very, very, very precipice of the decision making is the fighter. If the fighter goes into his corner and says to Tyson Chartier, or even says to the referee at the end of the round, by the way, I'm fucking done. This knee is done. I'm not doing this. No problem. There's no need for a failback because the fighter's called it.
Right. Chris Lieben on his stool. Guys, I'm not going back out there. We're done.
I'm done. 99.9% of the time, fighters will never do that. So the next level of hierarchy is the corner, because the corner are immediately available to the fighter in between rounds. If the corner then fails, it then goes to the referee. If the referee wants to Teflon fucking shoulder off to the ringside physician, fine. But the ringside physician comes in, and if all he does is a visual check of the knee
and a quick ask, hey, you doing okay? Yeah.
But I then think that it falls back to the referee.
Agreed.
The referee was watching the incident. That's his job. He knows what happened. Or she.
That's where the referee should be involved or could be involved, right? They've seen what happened. You know the state of that. And most of these people have trained, do train, have fought, understand these things.
I feel like, though, and maybe this is just a bias based on the conditioning of what I've seen recently, but it just feels as though there's like an unwritten rhetoric that the only way fights finish are by KO, TKO, or submission. And that actually the autonomy on the referee's hand doesn't exist. Now, I've seen, and we mention Mark Goddard all the time as being a gold standard in refereeing, and I've seen Mark in between rounds go to a fighter and say, you have a minute to show me something, or you have 2 minutes to show me something. And if you don't, you're done. And in some cases, I think that's brilliant and a very, very good use of his power, because he's saying to the fighter, it's on you, my friend. You can now, with the last 10 seconds, have a little think. And if you say to yourself, can I change this fight in 2 minutes? If the answer is yes, show me. The floor is yours.
Right.
If the answer is no, I've given you your ticket out of it.
Please know that I am watching and I will be here to intervene. But if you want to continue to do this, you need to show me these things. It's the between round version of you got to work. You got to do something. Show me something that we get mid actions.
Well, it's the when you're in turtle with your hands by your ear and the referee is screaming, you're not intelligently defending, move, or you're done here. That's what that is. Right. And I think that there needs to be an overhaul discussion, because it feels as though there's a desensitization. We look at Kattar and we're like, oh shit, that we are done here. This is finished. Unless there is a Hail Mary coming, we are done here. And of course, this is sport, this is fighting. The opportunity for a Hail Mary is available. Arnold Allen could have stormed over the cage and Calvin Kattar could have cracked him clean with a right hand, put him away, and we'd not be having this conversation.
Right.
But guess what? We're not. And for the majority of times, we're not having that conversation either. So I think there needs to be, and like I said, maybe this is a speaker's corner, but I think there needs to be a conversation about corners not saving their fighters, and the judicial process that goes on from the hierarchy of chain of command that is in that thing, with the sole purpose, I might add, of looking after these fucking fighters, failing abysmally to do their jobs.
Regularly, routinely these days. It's very frustrating. I do think it is a speaker's corner. And when you get around to that one on the list, feel free to hit up your boy. We move forward. Co-main event, Max Griffin, Tim Means. Max Griffin gets a split decision win. It's a good win. It gets Max Griffin moving in the right direction again after a split decision loss to Neil Magny earlier this year. He has won 4 of 5. He is putting it together late, still has some athleticism, very solid veteran fighter in the welterweight division. And there's not a lot more to say, I don't think, about this fight.
Looked really good in the first round. Showed his speed, showed his timing, showed his athleticism. But I wasn't impressed with the next 2 rounds. The pop had gone by round 2. He wasn't able to readjust from Tim Means just standing still, essentially, and saying, come on.
Tim Means being Tim Means.
Yeah. And, Tim Means then up the variety, up the pace a little bit, up the volume, and Max Griffin just didn't have an answer for it. And, the third round got the takedown early. There was some nice scrambles, some good control time and all that stuff. But I wasn't vastly impressed with Max Griffin's second or third round performance. If he could fight like he fought in the first round for 3 rounds, he'd be a really, really exciting, really, really dangerous fighter. I don't know whether that's a cardio thing. I don't know whether that's just my muscles are full of lactic acid and I've thrown big shots and I don't have big shots left to throw. I don't know what it is, but if that is the case, then pacing is something that needs to be worked on. But yeah, I mean, a solid win.
Heavyweights in the middle of the main card. Waldo done. Tresean Gore gets a second round submission win over Josh Fremd. Just, I mean, yes, it's technically a guillotine choke. To call it a guillotine sort of feels like a disservice to technical guillotines. This was a give me your goddamn neck. I'm going to put you to sleep.
So
was vicious.
This was half of what's called an executioner.
Okay. Walk us through it.
So an executioner is when you have back control, so 2 hooks on the back. And then instead of looking for a rear naked choke where you're digging your hand from underneath, you come all the way over the top like a guillotine and you bend their neck backwards. It's not really a choke, you just break their spine. An executioner is banned in most.
I was gonna say that needs to that sounds like something that no one should be doing to anyone ever.
Yeah, and I'm not sure. I think it's banned in MMA as well because it's technically a spinal submission, right? But then twisters are allowed in MMA, and that's a spinal submission as well. So, yeah, not sure. But an executioner is a very nasty sub. And Tresean Gore obviously didn't have the hook, so wasn't able to stop Josh Fremd from moving. But I think the submission itself tells us some things about Tresean Gore. And one of the first notes that I've written here, my first line in my notes is, we now know the level of Tresean Gore. And that level is, for as long as that fight continued, it was a pretty competitive fight. Tresean had his moments. And then Josh Fremd had his moments where he looked like he was getting to Tresean at the start of that second round, was upping the volume, was doing the fighting things. And Tresean looked to be slightly more tired than Josh was, although a lot of the immediately impactful shots had come from Tresean in the first round. And then when he got hold of the neck, and you saw it immediately, it was from a single leg, and Tresean just turned the corner slightly, angled his glove underneath the chin. You saw the hand pop out the other side. And then there was a tiny bit of intelligence, right? Because Tresean didn't immediately lock everything up and commit to it. He just posted like a Buddha grip. I don't really know if that's the real name for it, but that's the name that I was taught. He just grabs the bottom of his hand and grabs the bottom of his wrist, because like immediately, if something nasty happens and he feels like he's getting taken down, he can readjust his grip. He can move his hands. He can post with that left hand. But immediately Josh Fremd starts reacting, which tells you how deep that the choke was immediately. And then from there, all Tresean needs to do is just follow him. So we know that he's got a crazy squeeze. We know that he knows how to finish a guillotine. And it reminds me slightly of, this is going to be a weird throwback. I'm not sure who he fought. Let me just look this up. It's Danny Henry, who's a Scottish fighter, Scottish-European fighter.
Hakeem Dawodu in Dawodu's debut.
I thought it was Hakeem Dawodu. And Danny Henry, from a very similar position, I think it was a front headlock or even a single leg throw, wraps up the choke, and Hakeem Dawodu starts to roll. And Danny Henry's like, okay, motherfucker, I'm just going to follow you.
Just went high elbow and was like, cool, we're done.
Followed him through 3 rotations, and eventually it's done.
Put him to sleep.
Yeah. And it's the same thing here. Like, we've got a guy who's confident in his squeeze, who's confident in his ability to close the angle off, and is confident to finish the fight, and did so. I think we learned that Tresean Gore has a lot of work to do, but I do think, and this is what I've written at the end of my notes here, is that what we have learned is that he is a fighter that's had 6 fights, right? And if you're a fighter that's having 6 fights and going in and beating a guy like Josh Fremd and finding a way to win, but also learning in that fight that there are plenty of things to work on, the footwork, the head movement, the shot selection, all of that stuff. This is a perfect fight. It's a perfect fight because we've taken some licks. We've learned some things about ourselves. We've got a ton of tape to go back and watch, ton of things to go and fix. But you know what? We got the dub.
Well, and he's also done what I think is a smart thing. And I say this not to discredit the Lima brothers at all. He had Diego Lima in his corner. His brother, obviously, Douglas Lima, former Bellator welterweight champion. He's also gone to start training at Fortis MMA. And I don't say this because I have allegiances to Fortis or anything like that, given my relationship with Saif Saud. I just think as a young fighter with a bunch of raw potential to go to a gym where he's going to have scores of UFC athletes to train with that have gone through essentially the evolution and progression that he is at the start of right now, makes a great deal of sense. The raw materials are there. You could see that through season 29 of The Ultimate Fighter. He's just, as you said, a fighter that has had 6 fights. This is a good win. It's a good building block. I'm now more eager to see what comes next for Tresean Gore. Main card opener, the one that a lot of people are talking about as we sit here on the takeaways. Khalil Rountree Jr. gets a split decision win over Dustin Jacoby in what was this week's, hey guys, it's not a robbery, it's a really close fight. Those two things are very, very different fight of the week. You and I each watched this fight this morning as we're recording this. And not ironically, but I think fittingly, scored the first round different. And I think therefore scored the fight different. And to me, that's all there needs to be of this. And so for there to be this outcry, and we'll get to some of the outcry, feels just like we're doing stupid things here every week. And it's starting to get worrisome that we can't have close fights and intelligent people recognize that they're close fights and make more wholly intelligent arguments about them, if that makes sense. Because it feels like this is another one of those, hey, the guy I wanted to win or I thought won didn't win, so I want answers. And that's not what this is supposed to be.
I'm going to make 2 points. The first one is I don't think it's fair to say intelligent people. I will say, though, and first, my first primary point is before you go online and you start flexing your Twitter fingers, shitting on Ben Cartledge, just go and have a look at who that actually is and go a look at the gold standard of judging that he has put out. Go and look at the way that he conducts himself online and on fight nights and in all, not that he does a lot of media, but in the media that he has done. Just go and look at who that man is. Even if, and I don't think he did, but even if he had an off night and he made some bad decisions, which, by the way, everyone does because we are human. And if you, as these people tweeting Ben Cartledge, demanding explanations, calling him this name and that name and the next name, if you totaled up the number of mistakes you made that day, where does that stand in relation to Ben calling one round incorrectly, if that's what he did? And in my opinion, he didn't, right?
So I'll jump in here real quick because that was one of the interesting things to me that I was going to get to, right? So we saw Eric Nixick jump on Twitter and say, where's the transparency? This was the obvious round for Dustin Jacoby and he scores it for Rountree. We need to hear there needs to be some accountability from these guys. My immediate thought when I went to actually look at the scorecards was, well, there's another dissenting round. Like the first round is a dissenting round. Two judges saw it for one fighter, one saw it for another, and yet no one is looking at Chris Flores and saying, hey man, how did you give the first? Because like, if you want to argue, like you cannot reasonably argue that Ben is the one that screwed up that fight. And we're not here. I'm not here. You're not here defending Ben Cartledge because we have a relationship with him, because we are friendly with him, because he is a friend of the program and friend of the site. This is just simple to me. Like, two people scored that fight for Khalil Rountree in dissenting rounds, as our guys on the couch side judges, Scott Fontana and Dan Urban, will talk about this week. Go listen to that. You want even better in depth of this? Go listen to them this week when it comes out, and it's going to come out later in the week. It usually comes out on Mondays. They've got some stuff going on. It'll come out later in the week. I will certainly post it on my Twitter feed. Ben's not the only one that had a dissenting round, and yet Ben's the one taking the flack. And it seems to me like that is a perfect encapsulation of this.
For sure. And I think instead of saying like intelligent people, it just comes down to two things. The first thing is that in sport, sometimes it can be close, and that's fine. And the second thing is, yet again, a lack of understanding of how fights are scored and what it means to win an MMA fight. Yet again, I can't remember what fight it was. It could have been Tresean Gore or Max Griffin or whatever. And they were saying, like, Tim Means was doing a lot of work from the bottom. Not great work, but a lot of work from the bottom. And whoever it was like, oh, well, he's, Max Griffin's on top and he's got that control time. And it's like, yeah, which means fuck all. And then in this fight, yes, and this is something that I want to point out because we talked about this personally in our WhatsApp conversations, is the reason why this is an even closer fight. And you made the point that this is Chito Vera versus Rob Font. And the only difference, but a vast important variable here, is that Dustin Jacoby weighs 205 pounds and Khalil Rountree weighs 205 pounds on weigh-in day, same as Dustin Jacoby. When these guys are throwing voluminous shots, not sitting down on their punches and big winging shots, they still hit really hard. And that's because they're big men, just larger men. So the reason why this is even closer of a fight is Dustin Jacoby was undoubtedly doing more of the hitting, but it's how much impact were those shots having in relation to, for instance, in the first round, I scored that round for Khalil Rountree, and I scored that round for Khalil Rountree because I just thought when he landed, he was doing more immediately impactful damage. When he was landing, it was getting a larger reaction from Dustin Jacoby, which the other point of this, which we talk about every fucking week, is we don't know what the shots sound like in the arena. You know who does know? Ben fucking Cartledge and your man
and Chris Flores and Ron McCarthy, all three of whom are very good officials. And like the fact that you and I rewatching it, I think probably under the very same, very comparable circumstances this morning, muted, not listening to commentary, wholly focused on it, still came to different conclusions about round one, speak to the closeness of this. And we need to get to a point where we can just go, all right, it's a close fight. And these things happen in MMA, because here's the other part. If we continue every single week to badger the ever-loving fuck out of these men and women that score these fights, guess what's going to happen? The good ones that do this every weekend and have to face this shit every weekend are going to be like, yeah, it's not worth it anymore. This isn't worth the hassle of leaving my family to come and do this. And for Ben going across the pond to work in Las Vegas. And like, we as a community should want Ben Cartledge working as many shows in as many jurisdictions as possible because he's terrific. We should want the Ron McCarthys, the Sal D'Amatos going abroad because they're great. And if they're constantly getting berated and constantly being told, hey, you did your job wrong, and then the myriad ridiculousness that Sean and I talked about last week on our sort of special edition of Hot Topic, they're just going to say, fuck it, I'm done. Like, this ain't worth it. And then guess what? Then we get a bunch of people that actually aren't that good. Like, then they're calling me. Then they're asking me, hey, you've got one of these things. You're technically allowed to do this. Do you want to come and do it? I'd rather have Ben in that chair than me. And so even as you said, Harry, if he made a mistake, if he had an off night, if we disagree with him, leave him the fuck alone.
And I mean, look, there's a couple of there are some points here. And those points are that there are certainly sometimes that it would be good. It would be good to get some clarification from judges as to why they scored certain fights a certain way. But
absolutely,
it would also be good to get not just the fights that you bet on and that you lost out on, or the fights that were close fights. It would be really good to get an overarching understanding. So if Ben scores the easiest 30-27 that you've ever seen in your life, and he scores it 30-27 for the right person, it would be good.
Let's run through that one as well.
For somebody to be like, okay, so as somebody that has a 1% knowledge of judging, that makes sense to me. But what, as a guy that understands judging to maybe 95%, why did you score that 30-27? So I can do my homework. If there's a fight that's an easy 29-28, cool. Why did you score it that way? What did you see? What did I see? Because maybe we both got to the same conclusion, but I got there because I'm a fucking idiot and I've just guessed right. And he's like, well, actually, this is the reason.
These are the things you need. The smartest thing I ever did, and I've said it before, I will encourage any member of this community, fan, media, coach, fighter, whoever, analyst, broadcaster, take an officiating course. Sit down with the men and women that do this and that teach these things, and they will learn you up. They will coach you up on all of this. Because the thing you just said there, the last part of that, of maybe I got there in some half-ass wrong way or guessed right, was the most illuminating part of my doing it now, well over a decade ago. Is you sit there and you watch it and you think everybody's going to get to your conclusion. And then there's other people in the room that don't. And they might be people that are actively judging fights. And you just think, wait, what? And so, yeah, there certainly would be great value to transparency. And I also understand why there isn't necessarily, right? I understand why it's not something that happens regularly. But the other side of that coin is like, I would also like some I'd love for coaches to come out and explain some stuff from time to time and do it without the protecting my guy, without the protecting my own reputation, like just coming straight out and doing that. And until everybody's coming out and just laying it bare, right, to ask someone else to do something that you will not do feels a little bit like unfair isn't the right word, because life isn't fair, but like
it is unfair. It's absolutely unfair.
It's just horseshit to me.
It is hypocritical, it is arrogant, and it is unfair.
The last thing I will say on this, and I know it is a point that you agree with, so I will quickly cut you off and get ready to pivot. I don't give one flying fuck what the many users of Verdict MMA or any other app have to say about the scoring of any round. I have made this abundantly clear many times over. Verdict MMA is the voting on American Idol or The Voice of MMA. It is giving the populace a chance to feel like they had a say. And we've seen on those programs and on Verdict MMA that the populace sometimes doesn't know shit. And so I don't care. It's lovely that there's ways for people to be engaged and have community and involvement and engagement, and sure, have at it. It doesn't mean anything at all. So to quote them as well, look here at this source. I mean, if you want to have here are the people that said that have at least potentially some experience understanding, give me the MMA decisions page of of scoring those fights. And even then, and I don't say this like disparaging the folks that file scorecards there, and I don't know how many of them have gone through judging courses or officiating courses or fully know what they're could sit and articulate the way. There's like 4 people in this industry that I want to know their scores: Sean Sheehan, Scott Fontana, Dan Urban, and then the actual judges, and like judges that aren't judging the fight. Like, that's about it. Outside of those few individuals, miss me with it. Skip me. We got to just accept that there are close goddamn fights and not get all pissy and want explanations when it doesn't go our way every single week, because it happens every week. And the other part, you mentioned the hypocritical part. Like, bring that same energy when your guy wins. Bring that same energy when it goes the way you thought it went. And other people are like, nah, son, that ain't right. Keep it, maintain it, ask for the same transparency, ask for the same articulation, and then we'll be fine. Then I'm good. But it doesn't happen. So let's just cool it and shut it down for a little bit. We move forward in this fight card as we hit the 1 hour mark. We appreciate you being here on the Severe Takeaways. Spencer Kyte, Harry Powell. Middleweight fight, Roman Dolidze, Phil Hawes. So they get into a scramble. Roman Dolidze attacks initially a knee bar, I believe, and then switches to a heel hook. Okay, you're shaking your head. Go. You're the grappling guy on this. Just walk me through it.
This is why I'm so confused. Is he doesn't actually do anything. Of
Technically nothing is quite right. It's just
the sequence begins with Phil Hawes hitting a duck under from a left hand. Ducks under the left hand, grabs the far trap, pulls Dolidze in towards him. Phil Hawes closes his ear towards the shoulder blade of Dolidze, looking to hit a table, looking to take him down. Dolidze obviously understands, I don't really want that to happen, and instead Granby's, right? So then Dolidze is playing guard instead of being in a turtle position, with Phil Hawes being able to do the fighting things. Dolidze then does a great job of locking up a close guard and landing some elbows that look like they're doing some useful damage. They're causing Phil Hawes to react. They're making Phil Hawes make decisions. Fine, no problem. He then looks to go for an armbar. As he goes for the armbar, Phil Hawes pulls his arm out. What does that do? Well, by pulling the arm out, it offers a leg. Dolidze goes for a K-guard transition to backside 50, but doesn't manage to get all the way through to the backside 50 transition, and instead is in a position that would be a double out, a knee bar position, but he's not pulling a knee bar. He doesn't have the leverage to pull the knee bar. He's not in a knee barring position, if you will.
Right.
And the knee is off center. The knee is more like on his belly button than it is on his hip, which is where you'd want to apply the knee bar. So instead, I don't know whether he's looking to set up a heel hook, and it looks like he kind of is, but his leg entanglement, again, isn't in the right position, and his knee line isn't in the right position. But instead, he just torques Phil Hawes' foot. And I think Phil Hawes is doing the wrong things to get out, right? He should be looking to shut Roman Dolidze off or stand completely. But his knee is so bowed that as Dolidze continues to pull, I actually think the pop in Hawes' knee allows him to free his own leg.
Yes.
Because there's now so much looseness in that leg, he can just lift the leg out. And I also think Dolidze is like, oh, shit.
Well, Dolidze let go. Dolidze let go. Like, he got up, and you watch the sort of sequence of events. He lets go and like points like, that fucker's hurt. Like, we can't keep he's in a bad way. And the referee's just like, yeah, but he's standing. Like, he's not laying there screaming, I'm done. And so you appreciate a little bit of the humanity there, but like, this again to me is where like, isn't there a point where you go, right, but I just heard you scream out in audible pain and you're not walking properly, and just stop this thing.
So I think with this one, I think the referee did the right thing.
Probably.
And let me explain.
Unfortunately.
In grappling, if you make any noise in pain, it's an audible tap, match is done. Right? Done. It counts as a submission, right? Fine. Here, I don't think that Herb, I think it was Herb.
I believe so.
I don't think Herb had the possibility of having a great view of the angle of the knee. And I don't think he had a great view of the torque of that Dolidze was putting on.
Agreed. It's all underneath sort of the construction of their body.
So when Phil Hawes gets up and sort of stumbles backwards a little bit as his knee's unstable, I don't know that Herb knows what's happened, and you cannot call a fight it off if you haven't seen what's happened, right? And you know, I know that you're not advocating for that either. So Herb then gets real close, right? And Dolidze goes in as if he's going to finish, points at Phil Hawes. Herb like almost outstretches his arm to stop Dolidze advancing. And then when he sees that Hawes starts to like right himself back up and walk towards Dolidze, he's like, well, I guess he still wants to do the fighting thing. So then he allows Dolidze to absolutely shadow realm Phil Hawes.
I was just going to say, the unfortunate thing for Phil Hawes is that his own toughness, stubbornness, whatever it is, competitiveness allows him to get up and continue. And about 45 to 60 seconds later, he gets sent to the land of whispers and ghosts. Like, just when Phil Hawes gets knocked out, this is the thing that I thought in the moment. When Phil Hawes gets knocked out, and we've seen it a few times. We've seen Chris Curtis. We've seen Julian Marquez on the Contender Series. We've now seen Roman Dolidze. It is, you are all the way. He gets knocked all the way out. It is Debo snatching up that gold chain, knocked out. I do wonder if there was a point, and we don't know if the corner sees it and understands sort of the mechanics of what's happened. This feels like one of those injury ones where it, as you said, it was handled correctly, and God, it just, sucks that this is how it ended.
It does suck that this is how it's ended, but how this is different to Arnold Allen and Calvin Kattar is that this injury came as a direct consequence to an action that Roman Dolidze was doing to Phil Hawes. There was absolutely an intent for Roman Dolidze to torque Phil Hawes' knee, whether he wanted to get heel exposure, whether he wanted to force Phil Hawes to roll through so he could actually attack a knee bar, whatever the end goal intent was, the primary intent was to cause flexion in Phil Hawes' knee, and he did that. It just so happened that Phil Hawes chose not to roll, chose not to give the reaction that Dolidze wanted, and blew his knee out.
Ultimately, a very good performance for Roman Dolidze. Like, this is the other part of it. We can't take anything away, and there's no reason to take anything away from Roman Dolidze. This is now 3 straight wins. This is consecutive first round stoppages. I spoke to him before this fight. He admitted that getting that victory over Kyle Dawkins before this sort of left, he wouldn't fully commit to, it took the pressure off, but it took the pressure off. And we saw that he looked much more calm. He looked much more settled on Saturday. A great performance. We move forward. Marcos Rogerio de Lima defeats Andre Arlovski in under 2 minutes, chokes him out. I mean, just a mauling, just a thrashing, just a drubbing, and one that I didn't necessarily see coming. It stops Arlovski's 4-fight winning streak, which was sort of like 2 of those are split decisions, whatever. I think it resets a little bit of the understanding of where each of these guys stand in the division, but like nobody's coming away from this being like, hey man, do you see that Lima? It's one veteran clobbering another veteran. We move forward.
Yeah, sure.
No? Things to say?
I mean, not drastically. I just, I think that with everything there's context, and Arlovski's run had wins over an overinflated middleweight, an absolutely useless fuck in Chase Sherman, and then Jared Vanderar involved as well.
If you didn't name names, I was going to try to like figure out the math of who's. So the overinflated middleweight is Jake Collier, clearly.
Correct.
And then, yeah, if you didn't name Chase Sherman, I was going to have to try to pull from the recesses of my mind who Arlovski had beaten.
So, like, yes, don't get me wrong. A 43-year-old Andre Arlovski on a 4-fight winning streak was impressive, regardless. But
right,
the level of competition.
Yeah, he wasn't beating. Right. Middleweights: Jun Young Park, Joseph Holmes. One of those weird kind of just this feels like one of the fights that sort of personifies Sean's disdain for this division. It's fine. It's an okay win, but there's nothing here that makes me get, and like I said, coming into this, I've been a Jun Young Park believer, want to see him have success, think he might be able to turn a corner. Nothing here that tells me this dude's turning a corner and being more than this. It's just a victory.
I mean, the personification for this fight for me was one moment Park had Holmes's back, and then I literally looked down at my keyboard to write and looked back up, and Holmes was on Park's back, and I was like, wait, what?
Yeah. We move forward. Steve Garcia absolutely drubs Chase Sherman. This is one.
Chase Hooper.
Chase, see,
probably drubbed Chase Sherman as well, to be fair.
Well, and also maybe Chase is just not the right name to have in the UFC because you catch ass whippings. Because Chase Hooper, my fighter to watch this week, caught a serious ass whipping. And I know you have some thoughts.
He's just really bad. Like, I was thinking about this just before I spoke then, right? My head said, what would Sean Sheehan say here? Because he always tells me and always tells us, speak your mind, right? If you've got something to say and you can back it up, say it. Chase Hooper is really bad. If he was just doing grappling things, he may well have a far, far, far higher ceiling. But in MMA, when there's strikes involved, he just looks so out of his depth at every turn. And I understand that he's only 23 and he's only had a short number of fights and he shouldn't be in the UFC really. He should be on a regional circuit, still cutting his teeth, but he is where he is. And we have to say things as they are. For a UFC level fighter, he's really, really bad. And maybe the best thing that could happen here is he gets cut from the UFC after this performance and he goes and takes a year out. Maybe he goes to Thailand. Maybe he goes somewhere and he works solely on his stand-up and he gets comfortable throwing shots, dealing with his frame, maybe adding some size on, filling himself out a little bit, getting comfortable taking shots, getting comfortable moving his body in the striking form, and then come back, take some regional fights, build yourself up, because this was horrendous.
We had some years there where we spoke about young competitors that grew up learning everything, putting everything together in those teenage years, early 20s, in the gym. They were learning all disciplines, right? This is what we spoke about with the likes of Rory McDonald. It's what we see with fighters like Movsar Evloev. they have the complete game and everything is at a certain level. Chase Hooper, to me, is a prime example of, yes, someone who came up in a Brazilian jiu-jitsu gym or learning Brazilian jiu-jitsu to get to where he is at a black belt at 23, where his grappling is good. His submission game is solid. Like, and probably, as you said, in straight grappling, it's far better than this. But he hasn't learned the striking arts. He hasn't learned even the fundamental, rudimentary defensive mechanics. And oh boy, did it cost him. And look, we've done the thing now where we've probably spoken for 10 minutes about Chase Hooper and not really mentioned Steve Garcia, but with all due respect, Mr. Garcia, show me something against somebody else and we'll spin back around and talk about you in that instance. This was, as you said, just about Chase Hooper being bad. We move forward to the flyweight division. Cody Durden gets a unanimous decision win over newcomer Carlos Mota. It, to me, is just sort of another indication, representation of guy that has full training camp and some UFC experience and the ability to wrestle versus prospect that did pretty well on the regional circuit, but his one loss is to the one best guy that he's fought. And it's short notice and it just doesn't go his way. It's sort of, go ahead.
It was fine. I thought Mota off his back looked okay. He didn't get destroyed. He didn't get murdered. Threw up a couple of armbar attempts. It was fine. I'm absolutely not going to be calling for him to be cut or anything crazy like that.
Right.
I think he's got some interesting matchups in there, and maybe this is just okay, I've seen the level of some of the grappling there. Maybe I need to go away and do a bit of the grappling. But he looked fine on the feet, maybe a bit tentative after the first takedown because he knew what was available and what was coming. But yeah, I wasn't. It was fine.
And just sort of confirms or affirms that Cody Durden's just a solid dude. He's a good hand to have in the flyweight division. I think I said something along those lines on Saturday of like, look, not going to be a world champion or a top 15 fighter, but the perfect guy for this. Additionally, and I know I said this on Saturday, it's just amusing as shit to me that he's from Covington, Georgia, because he feels like mini Colby Covington in many ways. And it just, the irony's great. Opening fight of the night, a catchweight fight between Christian Rodriguez and Joshua Weems. Christian Rodriguez laces up an anaconda choke in the final minute of the opening round. You mentioned earlier that you had some thoughts on this, so I turn the floor over to you, sir.
Weems is trash. And I thought that the finish was nice, but he's not going to get that same finish against many other fighters. So the way the finish comes is Weems looks for a takedown as his hips hit the mat. Gonzalez, is that his name? Rodriguez, sorry. Rodriguez looks to wrap up an arm in guillotine. As the arm in guillotine, I mean, you're not going to finish an arm in guillotine immediately, right? You need leg entanglements and all of the things. So as he was wrapping up the arm in guillotine, he used a butterfly hook to knock Weems over. And as Weems's hip hit the mat, he uses that arm that's in the arm in guillotine to frame on the tricep, which causes the bicep to connect with the neck. And then you do the anaconda things and you do the choking and then people tap, right? That's how it works. Now, against most fighters, what's going to happen immediately after they drop your hips to the mat is they are going to start to transition their own hips. They're going to transition their own hips to a parallel angle so that as you try and butterfly sweep them, your leg is so extended that the leverage you have in your butterfly sweep basically doesn't exist, right? Or it's going to be so hard for you to create big leverage that they're generally going to probably knee cut over the top of your butterfly hook and end up in side control. Most people just won't bother using that butterfly hook. They'll just try to use it to regard, right? They use it as a frame to try and scoot their hips underneath and try to regard. Weems didn't do anything useful. and just got immediately tipped over and anacondaed. And like I say, like for Rodriguez, it's a fine finish. I don't think the further he goes up the echelon, he's going to find that same finish because the same reaction won't be there.
Yeah, I went into this fight wanting to see a little bit from Christian Rodriguez because he profiled to me as a kid that I had seen on the Contender Series. I know a little bit about. He had made his debut up in weight against Jonathan Pierce, held his own in a loss, had some moments where he was pushing Jonathan Pierce, wanted to see him down in his natural weight class. I don't think this necessarily is the fight or is the performance that you can really build too much of an assessment off of, because Joshua Weems takes it on short notice. Mrs. Weight is, as you said, not great, but it's a good finish. It gets you moving forward. It's something to build upon in terms of confidence and your resume. So he will get a step up in competition, even if it's just, the guy that he was supposed to face, Garrett Armfield, next time out, but a good win nonetheless, and a good way to wrap up the show. I liked this. I liked doing this, not immediate. This actually felt better. We've had some time to go through some of what, as we said, what people have been talking about, what people have been sort of shouting about on Twitter and into the abyss. I've enjoyed this. This works for me. Does it work for you?
Damn fucking straight. Look, anytime I get to sit and talk about fights or whatever, it works. But I think one of the things that it felt crammed on a Sunday a little.
Yep.
And I think to your point of just airing these thoughts out slightly in my brains, it just fits. And equally, like, and I'll say this, and maybe this is what we close on, but like, one of the things we absolutely don't want to do here is just replicate the big podcast. The big podcast
Correct.
is exactly what it is. It's been that staple. It is the staple of the channel, and it has been for a long, long time. And it's absolutely not our intention to just regurgitate those points and put them out here. I think what we're going to be doing is, talking about technical breakdowns a little bit more. We're going to be talking about the after effects of fights. We're going to be talking about storylines coming out of the fights. We're going to be talking about things from a slightly different angle. And one of the things that doing this now on a Monday or even a Tuesday maybe is going to allow us to do is, like you say, air the thoughts out. We can hear some of the public analysis. We can hear some of the backlash, and we can see how some of the storylines play out over the first day, 2 days of the aftermath of the card. And then we can come here and we can talk about them.
That really is what we're trying to do. I hope everybody has enjoyed it. I hope as we continue to do it, you and I will continue finding our legs with doing it here on later in the week. It's good time wise. Like, these are the little things that, like, we don't often peel back the curtain, but as you said, Sundays felt a little crammed just because you are 8 hours ahead of me and life happens. And so doing it this way, we are recording on a Monday morning. For me, I get up, I walk my dog, I say goodbye to my wife, I have a little breakfast, and then me and you get into it. This worked well. I hope it worked well for everybody that's watching. I hope in terms of, what we talked about and what we covered comes out well, is informative, is enjoyable. If it's not, hit us in the comments, let us know. Hit us on Twitter, let us know. He is at BJJ_Harry Powell. I am at Spencer Kyte. This is the Severe Takeaways on the SevereMMA YouTube page. We appreciate you. We thank you for watching, and we'll see you again next week.